Okay, cool. There we go. Hello, Lizzy.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm so excited to get to talk to you about your books. I took a sneak peek at your Amazon, and it seems like you have quite a few books out so far. Is it?
I do. I love writing. I can't stop.
That's cool though. So, what's your most recent release? What's the new?
Okay, so my most recent series that I'm focusing on is the Bitten series, which starts with Bitten by Surprise. And the second book came out in August,
Congratulations.
and that's called Bitten by Trouble. And that's a vampire and a psychic paranormal romance. They're quick reads, they're fast paced, a little bit of spice, and there's murder mystery and that kind of thing. And yeah, I did them short on purpose so that I could release them rapidly. So I have another one coming before Halloween.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. So, is your next one in the same series?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So is it the same like characters in each book or is it like a
It,
same world?
it it is actually, yeah, it's the first adult series that I've done where I've had the same main characters in each
Okay.
book. And it's kind of them, going through everything, which is different for me, but I really love it. And I'm like become obsessed with the characters, which is a little scary. I can't get them out of my head. I'm like, oh gosh. So I just keep writing.
That's fun though. I love that.
Yes. It's a
That's
lot of
really cool. So do you know like how long you want your series to be, or is it just as long as the characters are talking, you will keep writing?
I think it's as long as they're talking and as long as people seem interested, I'm going to keep going. So we'll
Okay.
see what happens. But yeah, because there's a lot of little things that have been planted. And I'm a pantser, which is a little bit scary when you're doing a series that's
Okay.
long.
That's okay. That's okay.
But hey, and somehow my subconscious works it out though. So I just trust and go with it. It
I
seems to work
love
okay so
it.
far.
You know what? I think that's amazing. So
Thanks.
what's the hardest thing about writing a vampire?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I guess the dark part. Not that I shy away from dark material. Some of my books have been in a darker vein, like dark fantasy, but it's that I have to, he's also the main, love interest and everything. So I have to keep him redeemable.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah. So like I've been writing his backstory basically. I'm
Ooh.
actually working on a novella for the holiday season, and it's going to be the kind of the story of how he became a vampire and how they met in the first life they were together and all that stuff. So
Love that.
it turned out to be a pretty dark story. I was like, oh, poor guy. Wow.
Aw. And then you feel bad for him, but
I
you keep writing.
do. I'm like, oh gosh, I torture my characters. This is terrible.
Aw. I feel like that's one of the fun things about being a writer, though.
Yeah, they can't come back and get you for it. So
They
that's
can't
good.
come back and get you for it. Okay, so what about your other character is a psychic, right?
Yes.
So is that
Charlotte.
easy to write? Is that tricky?
It's a lot of fun. So I don't know if people watching this know me, they know I'm also a psychic, a practicing psychic
Oh, cool.
in real
Okay.
life, but she's nothing like me. She's
Full
she's a
disclosure.
fictional psychic, so she can do things like I call it mind bending. So she can
Okay.
kind of like impose her will on someone. She has telekinesis. She can move things. I can't do any of that. So
Fair. Okay.
yeah, but she's a lot of fun to write. The books are all from her point of view, except for the novella that I'm working on. And she's just a really fun character. She's a really good person, but she can be pushed really far. So
Interesting.
yeah, we test her resolve on things.
Okay.
Yeah,
So she's pretty complex, is what I'm kind of gathering.
she is. She is complex. She's complex, she's quick thinking, and she tries to make the most out of some pretty rough situations.
Okay. That's cool though. So it sounds like she's kind of a go-getter.
Yeah, I would say
A little
so.
bit. So what was the inspiration for this series? Did you always know that you wanted to write this story? Was it kind of like bubbling in your head, or were you just like, you know what? What's going to happen if we take a vampire and a psychic and shove them into a world together?
I knew I wanted to do a series where I could have all the different supernatural creatures
Okay.
populating it because I wanted that to be my world, my universe to play with. And it's been really fun to do that. I knew that I always wanted to write a vampire because I love vampires. I mean, that's what drew me into fantasy. And when I started writing, um, a long time ago, Twilight was really popular and like nobody was taking vampire books. It was
Oh,
saturated because they all took so like everything they could find and then nobody wanted anymore. It was like everything's vampire.
oh, okay.
So I had to write other things, which was fine. I mean, I still enjoyed it, but in the back of my mind, I was always like, I really want to write my vampire.
Yeah.
And so now that I did this and I'm self-publishing it, I was like, I get to do whatever the heck I want to do. So, and I think I've kind of proved that, people are still interested in vampires. So it's
Oh,
good.
yeah. I totally agree. I love vampires so much. They're one of my favorite things to write.
They're so
Um, you
fun.
can do a lot with them and they're very complex.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot there, especially, if you're looking at like what drives them and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, and then the other thing that inspired me was I when I thought about actually doing the books, I was like, I want to do something that's like Sookie Stackhouse,
Ooh,
but
okay.
more modern, where she has more agency and more, I kind of looked at it like Sookie Stackhouse meets the X-Files if the X-Files was fantasy instead of sci-fi, if that makes any
Interesting.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's what started it, what kind of put me on the path.
I
So
like that. That's cool. So, did you always know that you wanted to be a writer?
yeah, I mean, pretty much since I was a kid. I always did other things, and then it was like in the back of my mind, oh, and then I'm gonna write, and then I'm gonna write.
Okay.
And when my kids were in school and I'd been a stay-at-home mom for about 10 years, and I said, it's time to go back to work, but I hated the idea of it. And I like nobody wanted me because I hadn't been
Aw.
working in 10 years. I know it's sad, but it's true. People don't look at like volunteering as work. They think, oh,
Yeah,
that's not experience. But then I was like, well, if I'm going to get rejected anyway, I might as well do what I love. So
that's really interesting.
yeah, so I sat down and I said, I'm going to treat it like a full-time job. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to study the business side of it and learn how to do this.
Okay.
And that was the first time I really tried. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since. So
That's amazing. Hey, good for you. That's really cool. So,
thanks.
what was the most surprising thing for you about publishing in general? Was it kind of what you expected, or was there an element where you were like,
Not
that's
at all. I think that the most surprising good part was that everybody, all the authors were so supportive. I
oh, I
mean,
like that.
overwhelmingly so, right?
Yeah.
It's so great to know that we support each other. We try to lift each other up, try to
Yeah.
help. I mean, there's always exceptions, but that's outliers. Like for the most part, I really think that's true. And that was huge. And that helped me keep going. The part that surprised me that maybe wasn't as good was probably the time involved,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
to get a book published.
Oh,
And
yeah.
again, when I started, like self-publishing wasn't considered, a good
I
thing.
know. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that was really hard. And there was a lot of gatekeeping and it took
Yeah.
years. I had a book. At the time I had an agent and I had a book that was on sub to one of the big five and they had an exclusive and they kept it for a whole year before rejecting it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that gives you an idea of what people go through, and that shocked me. Luckily, I'm very prolific, so I had other things to put
Yeah.
in. So, but yeah, that was probably the worst part.
Yeah. That's really wild. So, what would you say to somebody who wants to be a writer? Like, what's one piece of advice you would give to potential writers or new writers who might be toying with the idea of publishing a book, but haven't done it yet?
That's a really great question, and I think that there's two things that I like to say to people. I always like to be positive and upbeat, and I think perseverance is the key. That's
Okay.
number one. So don't give up because if you give up, then it'll never happen,
Yeah.
right? So why give up? And so is it hard? Yeah, it is. It's challenging. You really have to work and
Oh,
you
for
may,
sure.
it depends what your goals are, whether, things are going to happen, but don't give up. So that's number one. And the number two was a piece of advice from a writer that I really adore. She's a YA author, Libba Bray.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with her, but I used to write YA back in the day, and now I do adult.
Okay,
So,
cool.
but she said, write what scares you. And I really took
Ooh,
that to heart and pushed myself further because I was kind of in a comfort zone, you know?
yeah.
And so I think it's really important to keep, stretching and putting yourself out there and maybe straddling that line of what makes you uncomfortable, because that helps you grow. So, yeah,
That's really interesting. I actually like that advice a lot. Thank you. That's
good.
cool. I love that. So, kind of along those lines and things that scare us, book events. Have you been to any book events? Are you going to any?
Yes, actually, I love book events. Of course, when COVID came, it got really hard to do that. So a lot of stuff is online like this.
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to be attending New York Comic Con in just a couple weeks
Hey,
and
that's so
signing
cool.
there.
Okay.
Yeah. My other adult books are with a small publisher, City L Press, and they have a booth there, and it's kind of on my bucket list. So I'm going to be signing there, which I'm like so excited and kind of nervous about it, but really excited. So
Oh no, you'll be great. You'll be amazing.
thank
That's so
you.
cool. I love that.
It's
Very
pretty awesome. Yeah.
nice. So, I know that you are almost 3 books into your series now, right?
Yes.
Do you have any other paranormal creatures or characters that are kind of lurking in the shadows that you're thinking about playing with?
Oh, all the time. Um, so in the books, in this world, I mean, there are shifters, there are fae, there are witches, and all of those things. Like I have so many characters kind of in that little world that
Yeah.
I would love to maybe explore, like with offshoots and that kind of
Oh,
thing.
interesting. Okay.
So that would be really cool. The other thing is I have one of my other series that's through City Owl is a gin called The Gin. So it's a genie series, it's a
Oh, interesting.
trilogy.
Okay.
And I loved that. It's kind of dark fantasy, like I was mentioning before. And I kind of really love that world. I don't have plans to go back to it, but if it ever became something that people seemed interested in, I could totally see doing that too.
Okay.
Um, for some reason, though, people don't seem interested in genies. It's just not a
Oh,
thing. So I know it's weird, right? But
yeah. It's kind of hard to predict what people might be interested in. And I know that can change over time too.
yeah, for sure. So
That's
you
fair.
never know.
Okay. So, what's your favorite thing about shifters in general? Shapeshifters.
Ooh, um, I like that I mean, I like the idea of the animal kind of coming out, right? Having
Oh,
this
I love
other personality,
that. Like
right?
bursting
Where they
out.
can
Yeah.
kind of let the beast free, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I like it kind of exploring that side of them and how that might come out in a human personality.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so like my main shifter that's in my series, his name is Sam, and he's a wolf, and he's kind of the head shifter, and
Okay.
he butts heads with the vampire a lot, but he's not a bad guy.
Okay.
So that's a lot of fun for me. I like in the third book, there's a lot of banter between them actually.
Really?
So it was a lot of fun to write that. So yeah, it was cool.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I like writing shifters too. Like you said, it's really fun. I feel like all of these tropes we can just kind of play around with, and we get like our own little playground of, well, what if this happens? Or what if this other thing happens? Or what if I throw in a fae? Or
Right.
whatever it is that we want to do. It's really fun to have that power.
It's so cool.
So do you read a lot of paranormal romance, or are you one of those authors who writes in one genre but you read for fun in a different genre?
No, I read a lot. Basically anything fantasy related, any
Okay.
subgenre of fantasy, I will read it. That's the kind of stuff that I love. I will read sci-fi. I even write some sci-fi, but fantasy is still my number one.
Okay.
And so like, but I did start reading some more like contemporary romance. I read some dark romance to see what that was about recently because it was such a big thing like on TikTok. And I'm like, I gotta know, right?
What's
So I have to
happening?
test these things out. So yeah, try to read all over the board, but what I'm really interested and drawn to always has some fantastic element in it. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So what about when you were a kid? What did you read when you were young? Were you did you always love fantasy, or did you kind of go through like Babysitter's Club first and then then you jumped over?
Um, I'm gonna date myself now.
Okay, that's okay.
Sweet Valley High was like
Oh, I
the
love
thing back then.
those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those were really good. I loved Lois Duncan was my favorite, so kind of
Okay.
horror.
Okay.
Um, and fantasy, always fantasy. So like the first book that really grabbed me was The Phantom Tollbooth, which is
Oh,
like,
interesting.
yeah, it's just like built on puns, but it was a fantasy, and it was sort of a portal fantasy, really, if you look at it, you know.
Yeah.
And that I think that was the first book I ever read more than once, because I was just really into it. And I don't think I understood that at the time that that was fantasy. It was just something I really liked. But when I
Okay.
think back on all those books, you know, I
Yeah.
realized, oh yeah, that's kind of where I was headed with that. It was always the supernatural element that held my interest.
That's really cool. I love that. It's
Yeah.
always kind of fun for me to look back on like my old reading habits when I was young versus like how I like to write now and to kind of like compare and contrast that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know like when I was young, like the Animorphs books were coming out and I was not allowed to read those.
Oh
And so
no.
now I'm like, is that why I love shapeshifters so much? Is this a little bit of rebellion? Not really,
That's
but you know what I
awesome.
mean.
I really love that. You know, again, I'm dating myself, but my daughter was really into those. So
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, they're fun. Like going back and rereading those now, it's really kind of an interesting adventure.
that's cool. Yeah, I don't restrict my kids reading. I'm like, if you want to read a book, I'm happy. So that's kind of where I go. But
I'm the same with my kids actually.
okay.
And I think that's kind of good because most kids aren't going to read to rebel, like if that makes sense. Like most kids are like
Yeah,
curious or they want to have that adventure.
right, right. It's more of a safe place to explore too. So,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. A great place to hang out, a free way to travel or low cost
great.
for sure. So going back to paranormal creatures a little bit,
hmm
if you were going to be in a relationship with a paranormal someone, what are you most drawn to? Because I know for me, like I'm a vampire girly. Like I would definitely be like a vampire, but they would have to bite me. Like I would have to be a vampire too.
Yeah,
What do you think?
yeah, vampire. I mean, I know it's like cliche almost, but yes, vampire, I'm with
It's
you
not
100%.
cliche.
Okay, okay. I mean, yeah, that goes back to the vampire Lestat. I think that was my
Okay.
first, you know, and I was, yeah, ever since I've just loved vampires. So
I
don't tell
love
my
that.
husband. It's okay. But
You know what? This is our secret, us and the internet. It's a safe space. We
yeah,
won't.
I'll never look on the internet. Nah.
So, do you have a favorite fictional vampire that you did not create?
Oh gosh.
Would it be Lestat?
That it might be Lestat. I mean, it's really hard to beat that. But the other one would be Damon, you know, from Vampire
Ooh,
Diaries, because
okay.
Damon, I mean,
Yeah, I like that. Okay, cool. So, I just love how many different creatures you've written. I feel like I have so many questions like bubbling up that I want to ask you, but I haven't asked you about Fae yet. So, talk to me about when you write Fae, what does that look like?
okay. So I love the idea of Fae because there's so much you can do there, and so much like freedom as authors that we have to kind of make up our own lore as
Yeah,
well, because there's so many like variations and differences in the different kinds of fae, like
yeah,
types and that sort of thing. And I know that it's really huge, and you know, I bow to the people that are really good at it and are the big fae people. But I kind of look at them almost slightly differently. And I have to I feel like they would be creatures who don't think like us at all.
oh, interesting.
I feel
Okay.
like they have their own agenda, or not agenda, it's not on purpose. I think it's just the way they're wired.
Yeah,
Okay. And I think that that kind of is where you get the great conflict in there, or potential for it. And I think what I like to do, like in my books is have the different types of fae and have different, so that each individual character has a different personality, a different, some are good, some aren't good, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And like I like to play with tropes. So like you said, so one of my side characters is Daphne, and she's a nymph, but she's also the person who does the combat training for the military for
Oh,
supernatural
interesting.
people.
Okay.
So she like lives in the basement of this building of the big, base that they work at, and she
Yeah.
trains them, and she could basically take out anybody if she wanted to, but she's a nymph, and she's, you know, drop dead gorgeous and bonded with the land and uses plants and stuff. But yeah, so I like that kind of almost contradiction and stereotype, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a
So,
certain duality there, right?
right,
And I really like what you said too, that they don't think like we do. Like they wouldn't think the way a human would.
right.
And I think that's one of the challenges of being a writer is if you're writing a creature like, let's say, dragon shapeshifters, that's something I love to write. How do you get into that headspace
Right.
of thinking like a shapeshifter? So when you're writing a character, do you do anything special to kind of write from their perspective, or is it pretty easy for you?
Again, another really good question. So I like to think, because I have a background in theater,
Oh,
and
cool.
I was an actress for a little bit, um, much earlier in my life.
Yeah,
And I like to think that that kind of helps me get
yeah,
into character almost. So it's
I believe it.
sort of like I'm thinking from their point of view when I'm writing.
Yeah,
Um, Kind of hard to explain, but I think that really helps me. And when I started writing, I realized pretty quickly that first person was really pivotal for me, that was important, because otherwise I wasn't really understanding them. Like I wasn't, now I can do third person close or first person and it's fine, but it took me a
yeah.
long time to kind of get there. Yeah, I think
That's
that.
cool though. I love your answer. My sister's actually an actress too, and she's talked about that before too, of getting into the headspace of the character and really understanding their motivations for why they're doing things or how they're acting in a certain way. I've also
Yeah.
noticed, I feel like I've met a lot of writers who are like Dungeons and Dragons players. And
Yes.
they're,
Yes.
I think a lot of it has to do with fleshing out the character and understanding who they are, even if we don't tell the readers everything.
Absolutely. Dead on. I agree with you 100%. And yes to the D&D thing. And my oldest, who's an adult, is like a DM. They
Oh,
are
cool.
like, that's what they do. Like that's their thing. In fact, I think they're running a game tonight. And so I have played because they made me play, but I loved it. Like obviously I got really into it.
Yeah,
So it's fun,
that's
writers should
cool.
play. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think.
super fun. I love that. So, when it comes to writing, do you have like a special place that you write? Are you like an I only write at home kind of person or a coffee shop person?
I can write just about anywhere if you give me time and space. I need a good chunk of time to write. I'm not one of those people that can sit down for 10 minutes and just write and get up
Okay,
again.
yeah.
Like I need a few hours to really
Okay,
kind of like get into
get
the
into
zone.
it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have an office in my home because my oldest moved back home and took
Okay.
over their bedroom, which was my office for a brief time.
Okay.
And so now I am relegated to the living room with the
Oh,
animals. I have two bunnies and a bird,
okay.
and people randomly walk in at all times, kids, whatever. So that's not the best for me, but
Yeah,
I work with it. And then I also go to coffee shops often or
cool.
library or somewhere. Have laptop, will travel.
I love that.
So I
That's
kind of make do
amazing.
with whatever I can get my hands on.
Well, it's super nice for you to share your office with your kiddo. Can you imagine though, if you were like, all right, this is a 50-50 split and they woke up and you were just in there typing?
That'd be
The
hysterical. I
words
would
have to
love.
get written today.
I'm actually in my daughter's room right now, the one that's at college, like
Okay,
using her room because she's gone. So, because
fair.
otherwise we'd be interrupted by like 50 things probably.
You know what? I wouldn't complain about getting to see animals, but I think that's fair. That's a fair
Oh.
choice. So, Lizzy, it has been amazing talking to you. Will you tell us and anyone watching where they can find you online?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much. This has been so much fun and you are
I
so
know
sweet.
I've had a great
I
time.
can't
Oh,
wait to
thank
read your
you.
books. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
And you can find me just about anywhere. My website is lizzygale.com. It's pretty easy. You can find me on Amazon, BookBub, Goodreads. I'm on TikTok all the time. I
Oh,
love
cool.
TikTok. I don't know why. I'm just addicted to it now,
It's
book talk,
fun.
but
It's fun.
that's what I like. I'm also on Instagram and
Okay.
yes, Facebook too, although less so these days, you know.
Yeah.
But those are my big social platforms. And yeah, reach out, you know, send me a DM or an email or something, and I'm happy to talk to you. I love talking books and I love talking to readers. So
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And for everybody watching, make sure you check out Lizzy's books. I will also be including links when I post this, so everyone can check those out.
thank you
All right.
so much.
Thank you.